Commuter rail in America is changing. I'm Paul Comfort, and on this episode of Transit Unplugged, we take you inside one of the nation's leading commuter rail systems that serves the nation's capital and talk to Katie Choe. She became CEO of Virginia Railway Express, or VRE, in January of this year after leadership roles at MBTA, Boston Public Works, and Massport. And she's stepping in as VRE moves from a traditional peak hour commuter model toward a broader regional rail vision tied to their 2050 service plan and major infrastructure work along the way. Let's dive into this conversation with Katie today as she unpacks this system itself and how they're moving toward this broader regional rail system with major investments coming in the next few years. Katie Choe, thanks for being with us today on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so you've become CEO of VRE, Virginia Railway Express, in January of this year after big leadership roles at MBTA. Kind of a pivotal time for VRE. What attracted you to this job and why now?
The why now was really what attracted me. We're at this pivotal moment, as you mentioned, at VRE. It's a moment of transformation where we're going from a commuter rail system that serves Central and Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C., and we are transforming over the course of the next 4 to 5 years into a full regional rail system. So we're making major infrastructure investments in conjunction with the Commonwealth of Virginia to be able to run more service, more frequent service, and longer hours of our service. And it's just an exciting moment to be leading an organization through this transformation.
That sounds great. Yeah, tell us more about VRE itself. Vehicles, how big it is, number of employees, budget, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, VRE is a relatively small commuter rail system. We have 2 lines, 19 stations with 1 infill station that is in design right now. We serve primarily federal workers right now. So we have a lot of federal employees, obviously serving the national capital area. You get a lot of people working in DC who are federal employees, and they serve really the backbone of our ridership. We're currently averaging right now somewhere around the 9,000 rides per day. That fluctuates pretty widely given our reliance on federal workers. So when the return to office mandate was in place in January of last year, I guess we're in 26 now, it was 25. I saw a big spike in ridership as people were coming back into the office on a regular basis. And then as some of the workforce reductions have taken place in our federal workforce, the ridership has dropped back down again. So we are very much impacted by policies that are put in place by the federal government and their workforce. So that's one of the reasons why this transformation is so important, because we really want to make sure that we are providing service not just for those commuters and not having us quite so reliant on that one group of riders, but want to expand it to people who are working in other workplaces, as well as people who want to use a non-single occupancy vehicle for recreation and entertainment and other types of travel. So we are right now truly, purely a commuter system. We send people into Washington, D.C. in the morning and out of Washington, D.C. in the evening, and we don't run on weekends. And over the course of the next 4 years, as we complete these investments, we will be changing that model.
You go into Union Station, right? Is there another station you go into, or is that the main one?
So we terminate at Union Station, but we do also serve L'Enfant and Crystal City, as you're looking at those sort of crossing the river stations. I would say 45% of our ridership typically disembarks at L'Enfant. So that's really our biggest station.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, I remember when I was CEO in Baltimore, we operated the MARC train system. Same kind of thing. All the routes terminated at Union Station in Washington, D.C. So we were basically serving people that live in Maryland going to Washington, D.C. But we also had a connection point there with you guys at VRE, and so people could transfer.
Yep, we do have that connection point, and that's one that we'd actually like to, in the future, be able to utilize more. We certainly have had some discussions about run-through service with MARC, where we'd be able to run VRE trains into Maryland, and MARC would be able to run MARC trains into Virginia. So that's a long-term goal of ours.
Do you work with Josh Wolf?
We're sort of holding on those discussions until we complete the construction package, because nothing can really happen until we increase our capacity.
Gotcha. Yeah, Josh used to work with me when I was there. He's a great guy. He headed up MARC now. Okay, so that's a little bit about the service itself. Tell us about how you operated. Is it contracted out? Who's your governing board? People that listen to this podcast, they're in the weeds, they're in the industry. So give us the details.
I love people who are educated about transit. They're fun to talk to. So we have a really interesting governance structure in that VRE was created in 1992 by two separate transportation commissions in Northern Virginia. So the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission and the Potomac-Rappahannock Transportation Commission. NVTC and PRTC got together and said, we need a commuter rail system. So they together created this service, and VRE is that service. Yeah. And so our governing board is the operations board, which is, I describe it, I would say, as it is a joint committee of those two commissions.
Okay.
So I almost have, for those of you who are into corporate governance, I have three boards that I answer to, really. I answer to our immediate operations board and then also both of the transportation commissions. And some of the work that we do actually needs all three of those approvals in order to move forward. Not all of it. Obviously, there's quite a bit of delegated authority in there, but it is a rather complicated governance structure. But that also means, though, that we have a whole lot of buy-in from a lot of jurisdictions and a lot of support because everyone has a stake in the game. So it has its positives and negatives. I'll take the support and put up with the complexity.
Yeah. So you work with Kate and Dr. Bob and those two? Yeah.
I do.
Great people, good friends of mine. That's awesome. So you got that board, and how are you funded?
So we are funded, I would say, primarily through the jurisdictions, kind of. So they financially back us. We certainly get federal money through FTA. And so through the Commonwealth of Virginia, we get state money. And then obviously our rider fees, our ticket prices. And then finally, wherever we have an operating gap, that's backstopped by the jurisdictions that are part of both of those two transportation commissions.
Okay. And do you know what your Farebox recovery ratio is?
So we're actually required by the master agreement with the two transportation commissions to actually have a Farebox recovery of 50%.
Oh, wow.
It's been waived since COVID. And so we're now at about 22%.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I remember we had the same thing in Maryland when I got there, and they changed the law because it wasn't being met. Those things aren't being met. What's it cost right now to ride VRE for an average person? Is it zone-based or?
It is zone-based. We are at about $5 a ride closest into Washington, D.C. So our zone 1 fares are approximately $5. The furthest out zone, which covers Spotsylvania, that is, I believe, about $12 a ride. Obviously, our monthly passes and our 10-ride passes are, sort of variants of those.
Yeah. So maybe 10 to 20 bucks a day. And a parking for 1 hour there is probably that much somewhere, right?
Yeah, it's, when you compare it to either parking or, frankly, the express lane tolls, which are
our
the
hook there.
Competition, those express lane tolls are pretty expensive. So financially, we are definitely a good deal. In fact, we were just reporting to our board last week about transit and VRE in particular being an affordability solution for the Commonwealth of Virginia. When you look at riding VRE, take the Fredericksburg line, if you are riding from Fredericksburg 3 days a week up to 5 days a week, 5 days a week, you save almost $5,000 a year using last year's gas prices.
Wow. And gas is twice as much now almost. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And it's about $3,000 a year if you look at 3 days a week. So it's a very significant cost savings over single occupancy vehicles.
You contract it out, right?
Oh, we do contract it out. Yep. In fact, we just resolicited last year. They had just selected right before I came on. And Keolis is our commuter rail operator. They were our previous operator and they were reselected.
Yeah, that's great. Brad, the CEO of them, is a great guy.
Yes.
Brad Thomas. Yeah. Good. So you contract it out. Just how long's the contract? Like 5 years?
So we have a 5-year contract with 2 5-year options. So they can go anywhere between 5 and 15 years under this contract.
And do they do maintenance as well as operations?
They do. The previous contract actually had 2 separate contracts, one for operations and one for maintenance. They were both with Keolis. The decision was made in this last procurement to actually combine them into one contract. So we have one contract and they're responsible for both the maintenance and operations.
So you mentioned that VRE has traditionally been a commuter railroad, but you want to change that. Talk to us about that decision-making process. I think this is key for our listeners. This is happening not just at VRE, it's happening everywhere in America. What was traditionally commuter rail, after the pandemic, ridership patterns have changed, more, counter traffic going back, nights and weekends, all that stuff, right? Are you all experiencing that?
We are absolutely experiencing that. You said it all in that this is the new model for passenger rail systems across the country and across the world because commuting patterns and
Yes.
and workplace patterns have changed so much. The demand is really no longer in specifically get me to and from work. It now is people wanting to take the train for more than just work and then providing them the opportunities to do that. So where the growth is actually outside of the typical commutes. It is in the evenings. It is on the weekends. I know, using an example that is both close to my heart and is quite a success, looking at the MBTA, their highest growth is actually on the weekends and in those non-typical commuting times, the non-typical patterns. So we are expecting to see that same thing. I give the board a phenomenal amount of credit for last year initiating and adopting what we call the System Plan 2050. And what that is a roadmap to the future of VRE's system. And that moves us from the commuter system into a regional rail system, bi-directional, longer hours, weekends, that really serves the residents of Virginia in the way that they should be served by a passenger rail system, regional rail system, commuter rail system. It's significantly undersized. VRE is significantly undersized and underserving when you compare us to other size and like-minded metropolitan areas.
Yeah, that's great. So what's the game plan to get there? Do you have like a short-term plan? You said there was a 2030 plan as well?
We have milestones in 2030. That's kind of the initial capital work that we're doing is completed in 2030, and that's when we can really turn on a significant amount of new service. One of the challenges, the biggest challenge we have, I would say, outside of the change in the commuting patterns is the fact that we don't own any of our right-of-way. So we are entirely hosted by other railroads. And that obviously is a pretty significant challenge because it does mean in a lot of times we are not in control of our own destiny when we are out operating on the tracks. And some of that we are starting to take a bit of control over, although we still will not own the right-of-way. When you look at the work that the state is doing, the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, they're actually buying right-of-way from the freight railroads and then improving and expanding that tracks within that right-of-way. So the work that they are doing right now is adding capacity such that we will be able to separate the freight rail from the passenger rail along the corridors that VRE operates on. So right now, Amtrak, VRE, and the freight railroads all share essentially two tracks. In some places we have three, but in most cases we have two, which you can imagine in a busy rail corridor coming into Washington, D.C., we're really on top of each other all the time. Yeah. Not literally, thank goodness, but it's very safe, but it's also very congested. And so when we actually add the third and fourth tracks, or when VPRA adds those third and fourth tracks, the intention is to have freight work on two of those tracks, have Amtrak and VRE work on the other two of those tracks. It separates the services and therefore gets us out of each other's way. And that will have a massive increase of capacity for all of the passenger rail and make all of us run more reliably and more frequently.
Thanks for listening to the Transit Unplugged podcast. We are so glad you're here. If you're enjoying this show, we know you'll love our other transit industry programs. On Transit Unplugged TV, Paul Comfort explores the food, culture, and transit systems around the globe. You get to see everything. You'll love this show. And every week, we also offer up the Transit Unplugged News Minute, where you can get the latest industry headlines in less than 60 seconds. You can find out more at transitunplugged.com. Now back to Paul Comfort for this edition of the award-winning Transit Unplugged podcast.
One thing, Katie, that VRE has been known for is it has a great customer experience reputation. The customer service, I mean, even when I was at MTA 8 years ago, I remember people saying to me, you need to up your standards here at MARC so the experience is like what VRE has. So tell us about what that is all about.
I am so proud of this. And it's one of the things that I talk about the most because you're right, it does set us apart. And so one of the things is that everyone takes it so seriously, taking care of our riders. We respond to every email we get, and we pick up the phone when people call us. We know our riders. It's a small enough ridership base that we try and get to know people. People know us. People know the face of VRE, which is often Keolis employees. We even go so far as understanding that sometimes people's first ride on the train can be scary. And, they're not quite sure what to do. They're not quite sure where to stand. They're not quite sure how to board or to buy their ticket. We'll even meet people out at their station for their very first ride, walk them through the process and make sure that they feel comfortable boarding the train, getting on the train, getting all of their questions answered.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So we take a very sort of in-person approach to customer service. In fact, yesterday we were even having a conversation about whether we should be developing an AI chatbot for our website to answer kind of the most basic questions. And I was like, no, why would we do that? We have such wonderful customer service. We can keep up right now with everything, all of these inquiries. Why would we take that away? And so it's something that's really important to us as an identity, as an organization.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's kind of exemplified in what you just did this morning. Tell us about what you did this morning then before you came on this podcast.
That's right. I was up at 4:15 this morning, making my way down to our Broad Run station to ride one of our Manassas line trains because today is our annual customer service survey. And so this is an all hands on deck day for VRE where all of our employees, the ones not manning the phones back here at the headquarters, are out riding the morning trains, talking to our passengers and making sure that we get people to fill out our annual customer service survey. This is an in-depth survey that asks about behaviors, how people get to the station, what they like about their ride, what they don't like about their ride, direct feedback about the trips, direct feedback about schedules, cleanliness, kind of everything you can think of we ask about. Takes about 7 minutes to fill out the survey. And we get a 60% or more response on those surveys every year, which for anyone who ever does surveys, whether it's employee surveys or public surveys, response rates of 30% are usually considered good. And 60% of our riders fill out this survey every year. And when we tell people that and we get sort of outside as we're talking about the survey or people ask what sort of data we have on our service, they're always floored by both the amount of responses that we get and how good that data is. And part of the reason why we get that sort of response is because our riders love the VRE. They love being on it. They understand how much better it is than driving an I-66 or I-95 traffic. Yeah. They love the people on the train. We create a community. Same conductors, same train crews on the trains every morning. You generally get the same riders on the trains every morning. They get to know each other. It's very much a community. And they're passionate about understanding that we actually care. And that's where that customer service comes in. And so they really want to give us the feedback because they know we do something with it. And I think that that's really important. So there's a level of trust there that we've developed with our riders that they want to tell us what we can do better. And they know that we'll actually listen and do something about that.
That's great. Tell us some about your background, because you got like a perfect background for this job. It's probably why they hired you, right? But tell us about what you've done prior to this.
Yeah, I've spent my entire career in transportation infrastructure. My background's in civil engineering and construction management. And I started my career with the Massachusetts Port Authority. So I worked in airports, bridges, and maritime ports. And then I moved to the city of Boston and I was the chief engineer for the Public Works Department. So I worked on roadways and sidewalks, ADA compliance, as well as asset management. And then I moved over to the MBTA and worked first as their chief of capital delivery, in charge of most of the construction on all 6 of their modes that the MBTA operates. Later on, 2 years after I started at the MBTA, the FTA came in and did their safety management inspection, and I was tapped to lead the response to that inspection and work on the solutions to all of the challenges, whether they be infrastructure challenges, processes and procedures, cultural changes, those sorts of big organizational challenges and operational challenges related to the safety performance of the organization. and then followed that up by a little over 2 years as the chief of staff of the MBTA. So I've had successive progression in transportation infrastructure, ending most recently with the transit industry. And I have to say, I love trains. I love working around the trains. I was riding yesterday a train in from Fredericksburg in the morning, and I just felt this incredible sense of pride that this was my train and I was taking care of all these people on the train, and it was such a great feeling. So really exciting.
Chief of staff to CEO Nora Learson at CTA did the same role. We just had her on a podcast. She's now as acting president. When I was in Boston about a month ago, I was talking to Ryan Colohan, who I'm sure you're buddies with, the COO there. And we'd like to go up, I think, to Boston next year and film an episode of our TV show there and kind of showcase, because MBTA is a phenomenal organization. And Phil Eng, the new CEO, you said he's an amazing guy, right?
He really is. He really is amazing. And the work that he's done in Boston has really transformed the MBTA in such a positive way. And I learned a lot from him and from the MBTA that I've been able to bring to VRE. So it was a great experience.
That is awesome. Back to VRE, you've recently crossed 100 million lifetime riders. Congratulations on that. And I guess my final question is, what's next? Like, what's the very next things you're going to be working on? We've talked about this 3 and 20-year plan, but what do you got coming up right now?
So I am not satisfied with waiting for 5 years to 2030 to turn on all this new service. So what we're doing now is looking at ways that we can bring new service into the corridor with the infrastructure and service constraints that we have. So this year, for the first time in 10 years, we're bringing back a fireworks train for the 4th of July. We're going to be able to celebrate America's 250th birthday with VRE. And we're also looking for new customers that we can serve. How do we attract new riders? And some of that is looking at, can we adjust our schedules to run a little bit later in the evening? Maybe not a full evening schedule, but can we run a little bit later in order to allow people to have dinner before they head home at night, or to capture healthcare workers who might work later shifts? I constantly am asked about weekend service. I would love weekend service. I'd love to be able to explore more of Virginia by train. And so we are looking at ways that maybe we can bring some weekend service into the picture before we do the major service expansion, which will be about a 60% increase in service in total in 2030. So I'm hoping we can get some incremental improvements in service implemented throughout the next 12 to 18 months.
That's awesome. Well, Katie, 5 months, 6 months into the job, you are rolling. You've hit the ground running, haven't you?
I do joke that I don't know how I'm going to keep this pace up. So I'm going to have to come up with some new things next year.
Well, great. You're doing amazing work there, it sounds like. We're excited about the growth plans you have and excited to follow the journey there. Hopefully I can come visit you guys sometime, in the next 6 months or so and ride I don't think I've ever actually ridden VRE, maybe one time a long time ago. So I got to come out and try it.
Absolutely need to get you on a train. You're welcome anytime. That would be great.
All righty. Thank you so much, and best wishes as you continue to serve our nation's capital region in Northern Virginia. An important role you all are playing. I can't wait to see the expansion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Transit Unplugged, the world's #1 transit executive podcast. I'm Julie Gates, executive producer of the podcast. Many thanks to the team that makes this show happen. Host and producer Paul Comfort. Producer Chris O'Keefe, editor Patrick Emile, associate producer Cindy Raskin. Transit Unplugged is being brought to you by Midaxo, passionate about moving the world's people. If you would enjoy behind-the-scenes insights and updates from the show, sign up for our weekly newsletter, which has links to can't-miss conversations with the biggest names in mobility. Head to transitunplugged.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Transit Unplugged.